Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. I bid to Miss and fellow friends. For today, me and my friend, we're gonna presenting about financial statement analysis of IOI Corporation. Financial statement analysis is a process of evaluating a business, budget, project, and also other financial related transactions that help to determine the company performance and sustainability. This information is really important to these two types of user, which is external and internal user. So as we may know, the internal user of the company is the people who is with the management, such as the owner of the company and also the manager. So the example for the external user is potential investor, creditor, and also supplier. IOI Corporation is one of the most successful company in Southeast Asia. This company was founded by Tan Sri Datuk Lee Sin Chong in 1969. The company is one of the industrial conglomerate company which covers in agriculture sector, chemical engineering, and also in real estate. The company is also actively in oil palm plantation. They also active in chemical engineering and also in real estate. The company is also one of the main developer for certain areas in Selangor, Johor, Negeri Sembilan. They have been developing in a few regions in such state, such as in Selangor, in Bandar Puteri and Bandar Putrajaya. So the company was enlisted in Kuala Lumpur Stock Exchange on 1980, and later on in 2014, the company was enlisted in the main market of Bursa Saham Malaysia.
Analysis consists of liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, and the profitability ratios. For the liquidity ratios, the first one is the current ratio. The formula is current assets divided by the current liabilities. For the IOI Corporation Berhad, the current ratio is 1.87 times. We can say that IOI Corporation Berhad is unable to pay its current liabilities. So for the comment, a ratio of 1.87 times means for every 1 ringgit of current liabilities, the company only has 1.87 ringgit as of the current asset as the backup. So this current ratio shows that the company has a poor performance compared to the industry average. The second one is the asset test ratio. The formula is current assets less inventories less repayments divided by the current liabilities. So, the amount for the current ratio and the asset test ratio for IOI Corporation Berhad are same as the company does not have the inventory. So, as the asset test ratio is also under the industry average, we can say that the company is unable to pay its current liabilities without liquidating its assets. For the comment, a ratio of 1.87 times means for every 1 ringgit of the current liabilities, the company only has 1 ringgit and 87 cents of current assets to pay its current liabilities without having to sell its inventories. This asset test ratio shows that the company has a poor performance compared to the industry average. For the leverage ratios, the first one is the debt ratio. The formula is total liabilities divided by the total assets. The debt ratio for the IOI Corporation Berhad is 26.79%, where it is under the industry average. So we can say that the IOI Corporation Berhad use less debt to finance its asset. So for the comment, a ratio of 26.79% means only 26.79% of its assets are financed by debt, while the remainder is financed by using shareholders' equity. So this debt ratio has proven that the company has a good performance as compared to the industry average. The next one is debt to equity ratio. The formula is total liability divided by the total equity. For the debt to equity ratio of the IOI Corporation Berhad is 36.59%. So it is lower than the industry average. This indicates that IOI Corporation Berhad use more equity as the source of the financing. So for the comment, a ratio of 36.59% means that the company used 36 ringgit 59 cent of debt for every 100 ringgit as a source of financing in the company. So this debt to equity ratio indicates that the company has a good performance compared to the industry average. The leverage ratio is the time interest earned. So the formula is earning before interest and tax divided by the interest expenses. So the time interest earned for the IOI Corporation Berhad is 7.46 times, where it is lower than the industry average. So it shows that the IOI Corporation Berhad has a ability to pay its interest charges out of the operating profits. So for the comment, a ratio of 7.46 times means for every 1 ringgit of interest expenses, the company only have 7 ringgit and 46 cents operating profit as a backup. So the company time interest earned has shown that the company has a poor performance compared to the industry average.
Profitability ratio, the formula for gross profit margin is gross profit divided by sales and multiplied by 100%, which is 583 million divided by 588.8 million and times 100%. The answer would be 0.9901 or 99.01%. For the comparison, IOI Corporation Berhad's gross profit margin is above the industry average. We can see that IOI Corporation Berhad's gross profit margin is efficient in controlling its cost of goods sold. For the comment, a ratio of 99.01% means that the company is making 99.01 gross profit for every 100 ringgit of sales made. This gross profit margin shows that the company has a good performance as compared to the industry average. For operating profit margin, the formula is operating profit divided by sales and times 100%, which is 562.3 million divided by 588.8 million times 100%, which is equal to 0.9550 or 95.50%. For comparison, IOI Corporation Berhad's operating profit margin is above the industry average. We can see that IOI Corporation Berhad's operating profit margin is efficient in controlling its operating expenses. For comment, a ratio of 95.5% means that the company is making 95.50 cent operating profit for every RM100 ringgit of sales made. This operating profit margin indicates that the company has an excellent performance as compared to industry average. Net profit margin, which is NPM, the formula is net profit after tax divided by sales times 100%, which is 527.2 million divided by 588.8 million times 100%, equal to 0.8954 or 89.54%. For comparison, IOI Corporation Berhad's net profit margin is above the industry average. This indicates that IOI Corporation Berhad is as profitable as other companies in the industry. And also, the company is efficient in controlling its operating and financial expenses. For comment, a ratio of 89.54% means that the company is making RM89.54 net profit for every RM100 sales made. This net profit margin shows that the company has an excellent performance as compared to industry average. For return on asset, the formula is net profit after tax divided by total asset times 100%, which is 527.2 million divided by 9.5531 billion times 100%, equal to 0.0553 or 5.53%. For comparison, IOI Corporation Berhad's return on asset is above the industry average. This indicates that IUI Corporation Berhad is efficient enough in using its asset to generate return for the ordinary shareholders. For comment, a ratio of 5.53% means that the company's ordinary shareholders will earn 5.53 ringgit profit for every 100 ringgit invested capitals in the company. This return on asset indicates that the company has a good performance as compared to industry average. For return on equity, the formula is net profit after tax divided by total equity times 100%, which is 527.2 million divided by 6.9791 billion times 100% equal to 0.0755 or 7.55%. For comparison, IUI Corporation Berhad's return on equity is under the industry average. This result shows that IUI Corporation Berhad has earned low return from their investment and used their equity capital unwisely and ineffectively. For comment, a ratio of 7.55% indicate that IUI Corporation Berhad's common stockholder will earn 7.55 profit for every 100 ringgit of their investment in the company. This return on equity shows that the company has a weak performance as we compare to industry average.
For the justification, the first one is current ratio under the liquidity ratio. Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad's current ratio is 17.92 times and IUI Corporation Berhad is 1.87 times. This indicates that Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad current ratio is higher than the industry average, which is 2.97 times, while IUI Corporation Berhad's current ratio is under the industry average. These ratios for both companies shows that the IUI Corporation Berhad has a poor performance compared to the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. It's because IUI Corporation Berhad has a lower current assets as compared to the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A lower current asset indicates that a company has a less ability to pay its current liabilities. For the asset test ratio, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad's asset test ratio is 17.45 times and IUI Corporation Berhad is 1.87 times. Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad asset test ratio is higher than the industry average, which is 2.32 times, while IUI Corporation Berhad is under the industry average. This asset test ratio shows that IUI Corporation Berhad has a poor performance compared to the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IUI Corporation Berhad has lower liquid current assets than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. So, lower asset test ratio indicates that a company has less ability to convert current assets into cash. For the debt ratio, the debt ratio for the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad is 46.16% and IUI Corporation Berhad is 26.79%. Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad's debt ratio is higher than the industry average, which is 30.46%, while IUI Corporation is lower than the industry average. So these debt ratios for both companies shows that IUI Corporation Berhad has a good performance as compared to the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IUI Corporation Berhad used less debt to finance its assets than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A lower debt ratio indicates that the company has low financial risk and use more shareholder equity to finance its assets. The debt to equity ratio for the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad is 82.34% and IUI Corporation Berhad is 36.59%. So Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad debt to equity ratio is higher than the industry average, which is 63.94%, while IOI Corporation Berhad's debt to equity ratio is lower than the industry average. This debt to equity ratio shows that IOI Corporation Berhad has a good performance than the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad use less debt as sources of financing than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A lower debt to equity ratio indicates that a company use more shareholders' equity as sources of financing to pay its assets. So the last one is the time interest earned. The time interest earned for the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad is 623.96 times, and IOI Corporation Berhad is 7.46 times. Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad's time interest earned is higher than the industry average, which is 132.43 times, while IOI Corporation Berhad is under the industry average. So this time interest earned for both companies shows that the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad has a better performance than the IOI Corporation Berhad, because Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad has a higher time interest earned than IOI Corporation Berhad. So this is because the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad has higher operating profit to pay its interest expenses. A higher time interest earned indicates that the company has more ability to pay interest charges out of the operating profit.
For gross profit margin, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad gross profit margin is 48.5%, and IOI Corporation Berhad's gross profit margin is 99.01%. Both companies' gross profit margins are higher than the industry average, which is 27.07%. This gross profit margin for both companies show that IOI Corporation Berhad has a better performance than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad has lower cost of goods sold than the Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A higher gross profit margin would indicate that a company could make a good profit on sales, and the company also could keep overhead costs in control. For operating profit margin, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad operating profit margin is 46.93%, and IOI Corporation Berhad's operating profit margin is 95.5%. Both companies' operating profit margins are higher than industry average, which is 11.3%. This operating profit margin for both companies show that IOI Corporation Berhad has a better performance than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad is more efficient in controlling its operating expenses than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A higher operating profit margin indicate that financial efficiency and stability. For net profit margin, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad net profit margin is 36.07%, and IOI Corporation Berhad's net profit margin is 89.54%. Both companies' net profit margins are higher than the industry average, which is 8.07%. These net profit margins for both companies indicate that IOI Corporation Berhad has a better performance than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad is more efficient in controlling its financial expenses than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. The higher the ratio of net profit margin, the more effective a company will be at cost control. For return on asset, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad return on asset is 3.69%, and IOI Corporation Berhad return on asset is 5.53%. IOI Corporation Berhad return on asset are higher than the industry average, which is 5.08%. This return on asset indicate that IOI Corporation Berhad has a better performance than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad, as IOI Corporation Berhad's ratio is higher than industry average ratio. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad is more efficient in utilizing its asset than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A higher ratio of return on asset indicates that the company could make maximum use of its asset to get more profits. For return on equity, Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad return on equity is 6.73% and IOI Corporation Berhad return on equity is 7.55%. Both companies' return on equities are lower than the industry average, which is 9.51%. These return on equities for both companies indicate that both companies have poor performances, but IOI Corporation Berhad has a better performance than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. This is because IOI Corporation Berhad is more efficient in generating return for the ordinary shareholders than Kuala Lumpur Kepong Berhad. A higher ratio of return on the equity indicates how effectively the company's capital is being reinvested.
Here are the possible causes and some recommendations to improve the company's ratios. Under liquidity ratio, both current ratio and acid test ratio are lower than the industry average. This may be due to the company has less cash because of their poor debtors collection system and poor cash management system. As we can see, both figures for trade receivables and cash and bank are low under the current assets. Hence, the company should give discount to their customers to encourage cash sales better. This is to enhance the amount of cash in order to improve their current ratio. Besides, IOI Corporation Berhad should learn to improve their debtors collection system. For example, if the product or service provided is on a credit basis, the company should give discount to encourage the debtors to pay early. Next, the company also should manage their current liabilities effectively. For instance, if the current liabilities are too high, the company may need to reduce them by paying existing creditors or by using long-term sources for future financing. This is to make the company becomes more liquid and has higher ability to cover its current liabilities. Next, under leverage ratio, the debt ratio and debt to equity ratio are lower than the industry average. The possible cause is that the company may use more equity and less debt, such as borrowings, to finance its assets. The company may have a low reliance on the external financing and have a higher reliance on internal financing, such as retained earnings. To even lower the ratio, the company should have a combination of loans if they are making loans. It is because each financial institution has its own interest on loan, hence the cost of capital can be reduced. Meanwhile, the time interest earn ratio for the company is lower than the industry average, and this indicates a lower ability to fulfill the interest obligations. The possible cause is that the company may be a lower operating profit earner, which means the company may have low revenue and high operating costs. Some recommendations to improve the ratio are to increase the sales and to decrease the expenses. This must be done to increase the company's earnings before interest and taxes. Other than that, the company should settle its debt as the interest expenses will be reduced once the debt is settled. Lastly, the company should consider issuing more equity as the company's capital structure because the level of interest expenses will be reduced when there is lesser debt. Moving on is the profitability ratios. All those gross profit margin, operating profit margin, and net profit margin of the company are much higher than the industry average. The possible causes for high gross profit margin are the company may have high revenues due to high quality products and services. They also may have low cost of goods sold by efficiently controlling its labor costs, material costs, and production wastage. A high operating profit margin is due to its efficiency in controlling its operating expenses, which resulted in low operating expenses, while a high net profit margin indicates that the company efficiently managed its financial expenses and operating expenses. As for the company's return on asset ratio, It shows that the company's ratio is higher than the industry average. This is because the company is efficient in utilizing its assets to generate return for the ordinary shareholders, while the return on equity ratio of the company is lower than the industry average. The possible cause is that the company did not manage to generate high return to its ordinary shareholders for their investments. Some recommendations to improve return on equity are by obtaining more sales and increasing the product price. Other than that, lowering the cost of goods sold and overhead expenses also can increase the company's profits, which will result in higher return on equity. Next, the company also can improve its asset turnover. This is because when the company sells more of its assets, more profit will be earned by the company. This is the common size ratio analysis for the company's statement of financial position, exclusively for its non-current assets and non-current liabilities. The property, plant and equipment figure has slightly dropped from 1.03% in 2018 to 1% in 2019, partly because of depreciation to write off the aging assets and disposals of other property, plant and equipment in the year of assessment 2019. While the figure for right-of-use assets and intangible assets remain unchanged, most probably because there was no acquisition of new intangible assets in the past. Since IOI Corporation Berhad is a plantation and resource-based manufacturing business, the investments in its subsidiaries constitute major part of the total non-current assets. It shows that the figure has decreased from 81.06% to 80% due to the impairment losses recorded in 2019, while the amounts due from subsidiaries has increased by 1.28% because there is an increment in the outstanding amount paid on behalf of the shareholders. The investments in associates and derivative assets both have slightly decreased by 0.04% and 0.16% respectively. The decreases in derivative assets are due to the absence of interest rate swap contracts in 2019, which was used to hedge its exposures to interest rates movement. Moreover, the increasing amount of deferred tax assets by 0.07% indicates that the business had overpaid off its taxes. Lastly, other non-current assets have slightly decreased due to decreasing interest in a joint venture, as it constitutes 0.38% of total non-current assets in 2018 and 0.32% in 2019. Borrowing figure has increased from 25.53% to 28.88% from 2018 to 2019 respectively, indicating that the company has taken on more borrowings in Islamic financing facilities. The amounts due to its subsidiaries has decreased from 71.2% in 2018 to 69.61% in 2019, as the outstanding amount is paid and it constitutes largest portion of the total non-current liabilities. The amount of derivative liabilities has decreased by 1.57% from 2018 to 2019 because of decreasing cross-currency swap contracts, which was used to hedge its exposures of borrowings. Next, a decrease of 0.19% for the deferred tax liabilities in 2019 as compared to 2018 shows a favorable reporting, as the business had paid the overdue tax assessed in the previous period, while both lease liabilities and other non-current liabilities remain unchanged with no records in 2018 and 2019. The common size financial statement analysis shows a favorable reporting for the company since it has a healthy balance sheet. IOI Corporation Berhad is solvent because it has sufficient resources to fulfill its obligations. This is explained by the company having a greater amount of assets as compared to its liabilities.
In conclusion, the financial statement analysis is really important for a company in order for them to evaluate their performance and sustainability. The information from the financial statement analysis can help them to forecast future planning for the company. So the future planning will help them to stay relevant in the market or also enhance their business performance. That's all from us. Thank you.